Yeah. But this morning we had a talk and by this professor from USA on
Right.
data analytics, and it was well attended, about 50 people. Yeah.
Right. Right.
You're working from home, Edward?
I am, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like a home behind you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start now. Let me introduce you, and then we
Okay.
start now. Okay, thank you all for coming this afternoon. And today we are honored to have Edward Chin to come and give us a talk. I've known Edward since he was 7 years old. We were classmates together in Lhasa School, Klang, and Edward has always been a very brilliant guy. Okay, since standard one, he's always the top one or top two all the way through school. Okay, and it is no surprise that he's an Oxford first class graduate and also a high flyer in Shell Singapore and the various companies he has worked for. Okay, Edward has help develop and implement IT strategies in global organizations in banking, insurance, oil and gas, biotech industries. And if you notice, all those are rich companies, and as well as the United Nations. Okay, he actually was based in Switzerland, the United Nations headquarters, Zurich, right?
Geneva. Geneva.
Geneva. Okay, and he has today more than 36 years of experience working in IT, uh, and he comes with a broad range of experience gathered from living and working overseas in 6 countries, UK, Singapore, Netherlands, Turkey, Australia, and Switzerland. And I'm so glad that he's back here to his birthland in Malaysia to contribute to Malaysia. So Okay, we will let Edward over to you, Edward. Yeah.
Jin Hui, thank you very much for the introduction. Very kind of you. Thank you very much for inviting me to share some thoughts around IT strategy with your fellow with your colleagues as well with your students. Assuming most of the people on this call are students. Yeah, sometimes you'll see that I'm looking by the side. That's because I got a big screen. So I'm sorry that may sound look a bit rude, right? But I'll try to look straight on most of the time. So good afternoon to all of you. Thank you so much for making time to come and listen to my talk. I hope that you will find it beneficial, that you can apply some of the ideas in your future career. So I've entitled this the house with 7 rooms. Yeah? And you'll learn why later on, right? Okay, so what I'm going to try to do here is to talk about IT strategy. What's an IT strategy, right? Why it's important to have one, and how to develop a strategy, how to implement one, what are the skills required, and what happens during a crisis, during an economic crisis, as we are all experiencing today, right? But before I get into that, I think Chin Hui has mentioned most of the things I wanted to say. Now, I've been in IT for many years in different industries, in different countries. And in fact, the first time that I actually developed an IT strategy was in 1992 when I was working for Shell in Turkey. I was based in Istanbul for 3 years, right? And I wonder how many of you had been born by 1992. I expect that most of you will have been born after that, right? So I mean, it goes to show that the whole topic of IT strategy is something that started, of course, with the introduction of IT in the working place, and over the years, it has become more and more sophisticated and complex and so on, right? But there are some basics around IT strategy which were relevant in 1992 as they are today, right? And hopefully I will be able to share with you what those basics are, and with most of you, I imagine embarking on your studies and you're going to start your career. It's good that you're talking about IT strategy now, because it's something which you have to. It's a skill, yeah. It's a skill, and like all skills, if you apply yourself, you can acquire the skill. And I only did my first IT strategy about 10 years after I started to work. Yeah? So so you have the advantage. Okay. Let me just sort of say what are my assumptions about the audience. I know a webinar, one of the disadvantages of a webinar is that you don't know who you're talking to, right? I can see icons on the screen with your initials and some of you with your faces, and you all look pretty young. So I think some of you may be here because IT strategy is a topic in your exam and you want to learn more. I think the good news is that I'll be sharing with you some practical things that I've done with IT strategy. But the bad news is that I'm not going to refer to any book that you can refer to as well, right? Because it's all going to be based on my experience. Yeah? But today, if you want to find out more about IT strategy, you just Google IT strategy. You get a whole lot of articles about it, right? There could also be some of you who are interested in technology in general. You're interested in strategy development. Yeah? But strategy is always seen like a very sexy thing, right? You need to talk about strategy, right? Some of you may be very interested in that, and some of you may also want to become a technology strategist, right? So that's why you are here, or maybe someone in your family works in IT and talks about IT strategy, or maybe your girlfriend or your boyfriend is working in IT and they keep talking about IT strategy, so you want to be in the know, right? So I'm going to share with you some tips about what it's all about, and then there could be some of you who are really fearful about technology. Yeah? And when you hear words like IT strategy, you say, "Oh, it's a big thing." I don't think I can do that. But I hope that you'll find that it's actually a very simple thing. Yeah, all of us use technology day in day out, right? Without even thinking about it. And so we are in fact making IT strategy decisions a lot of the times without even knowing that they are an IT strategy decision. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, so what I'll try to do is, as I said, I will share with you my experience in developing IT strategies, and I want to try to make it as useful, as practical as possible. So I want to take you on a journey, right, of actually developing an IT strategy, that you have a feel of what it's like to develop an IT strategy. And then along the way, I'll be giving you some practical tips on developing the required skills. Yeah. Okay. So at this point, you may then say, "Oh, yes, this is what I thought this was going to be. I will continue to be at a webinar." But some of you may say, "Oh, no, this is boring. I want to drop off." So if you feel that way as well, that's fine, because sometimes the title does not tell you what it's all about. Okay. So those of you who are staying on, let me just get into it, right? The first tip I'm going to give you is that you can actually use IT strategy to start a conversation. Sometimes you meet with friends, you meet with people, and then you talk about the usual things, right? And then you run out of things to talk about. But you can actually use IT strategy to start a conversation. And one of the very important conversations that all of you are going to be having, when you graduate, is when you start looking for a job, right? When you go for a job interview, at the end of the interview, you're going to be asked by the interviewer, right? Do you have any questions for us, right? And a lot of interviews, they don't prepare well for the interviews. They don't even know why. So, no, I'm okay. I don't have any questions now. Maybe I may have some questions later. Now, I'm going to share with you a tip. If you're applying for a job in IT, right, you can actually, at that point in the interview where you ask, do you have any questions? You can bring in this IT strategy concept and say, tell me about the IT strategy of your company, yeah, and see what kind of answers you're going to get. It'll be very interesting. Yeah? And you can try this on, in fact, anybody who's working in IT, including, for example, I would imagine if you're in MMU, you would have an IT manager who looks after all the IT facilities in the university. One day, if you happen to bump into him over lunch, or just bring him along and say, tell us about the IT strategy for MMU, right? And see what answers you get. Okay? So that's the first thing, right? What is the IT strategy of your organization, of your company? Right? In fact, you can even bring this down, right, to families. Yeah. You can also, when you meet with friends and so on, you can ask them, what's the IT strategy of your family? And don't laugh, because in most homes today, right, everybody uses a mobile phone and all kinds of applications. Everybody is taking photos and so on, right? And some families are very organized. They say, okay, we all use Apple, right, so that we can share photos, share documents, and we can even share the space in the cloud together, right? And there's some families, everybody's doing something different. Somebody's got a Samsung, somebody's got an Apple and all that. Then when it comes to sharing, all you do is you use WhatsApp to share information. And then when you look for information, it's all over the place, right? So you can see there are two different strategies there, right? And then you should also reflect and say, when you're at home, what's the IT strategy of your family? Right? And believe me, this is becoming more and more and a very important topic, because if you don't have the right strategy, you can spend a lot of time, duplicating information, looking for information, and overpaying for your subscription. Right? If you have some people using Google, some people using iCloud, and you have a terabyte of space for each, and you find that you don't use much, but you're paying for 2 subscriptions. But if you both can share, you can reduce your cost, right? So simple thing like this. Okay, anyway, coming back to this, right? When you ask this question, what is the IT strategy of your company? What do you think the answer? How do you think your question will be answered? Yeah? Take a pause here, and if you like, you can put into the chat to say what sort of answers you would expect from the person that you ask this question. Yeah. So if I ask you what's the IT strategy of a company, what kind of answer do you think you'll get? They don't know. Well, I'm sure you have some idea how Now imagine you have the IT manager of MMU sitting in front of you, and you were to ask that person, what's your IT strategy? What do you think he will say? Okay, let me share with you some possible answers here. Okay. Some will say, oh, we use Microsoft Office, or we use SAP, or we use Google. Okay. Some may try to tell you about all the IT projects that they're doing. And a very common thing, they'll say, oh, we are going digital, we're going to roll out mobile applications. Some will say, oh, we are now working from home, so we use Zoom a lot. Yeah. And some will be talking about specific projects. Oh, we are going to upgrade our ERP system. Or we're going to have a new HR system in the cloud. We're going to use digital marketing. We're going to use, or we're going to use AI for customer service. You hear about AI a lot, right? People, and that's a sexy thing. People say, I use AI. And we want to do more with data, right? And now we're doing some machine learning pilots. Yeah. Or we are selling our products online more and more. Oh, we are allowing our customers to pay using credit card, debit cards, PayPal, and so on. Or simply they may say, oh, we are now moving to our data center. We're going to outsource, and we're going to set up a project management office. So these are all different answers that you'll get from different people when you ask them that question, because everyone has a different idea what an IT strategy is. And these are not wrong. Yeah, these are not wrong, but these are just different views of a bigger thing called the IT strategy. Everyone has a small view of what the whole thing is, so they give you their perspective, right? Now, sorry, I was dying. Okay, so it's useful to have a framework to structure your thinking, because you're going to get so many answers. You need to put them into some structure, so some framework, so you can process the information, right? And to introduce to you that framework, let me ask you this question. Would you recognize the layout plan for a home when you see one? Okay, when I mention the word layout plan for a home, you would have a certain image in your mind, right? And it looks something like this, right? When you see a diagram like this, you know that these are all layout plans for different homes. But you can tell a layout plan when you see one. A layout plan is a diagram where you show the kitchen, the dining room, the room, and so on, right? So especially when you're trying to shop for a new house and so on, you look at the plan, and then you look at the layout, right? So when you see that is the layout plan for a home. Yeah? So a similar question you could ask is, can you what's the layout plan of an IT strategy? Yeah? How would the layout plan for an IT strategy look like? You know what the layout plan for a home looks like. What would the layout plan for an IT strategy look like? Yeah? That's why I'm going to try. This is a very important, simple but very important concept. Yeah? So to introduce the layout plan for an IT strategy, let's just talk about a typical layout of a strategy. Yeah? When people talk about strategy, think about this. A strategy is a house with 4 rooms. Yeah? There's a room called current situation. There's a room called target and vision. There's a room called roadmap, and there's a room called principles. Yeah? Have this very important layout of a strategy. You'll find it very useful whenever anyone uses the word strategy. Yeah? So what this means is that when you're talking about strategy, even for yourself, right, when you're now planning your strategy for the rest of your life, yeah, how do you do it, right? And one way of thinking about it is to say, I have a house, and this house has these 4 rooms. The first thing I'll do is I go into the room called current situation. When you're in that room, you make a list of all the things about yourself currently, what you like, what you don't like, and what you're studying, how much money you have, blah, 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 right? And then you can go to the room where you have a target or vision. You say, oh, this is, I want to be in 10 years or 20 years. I want to, have a family with so many kids. I want to be working for a multinational company. I want to be working in this industry. I want to, so you can have a lot of vision for yourself. I want to be a person who has a lot of money so that I can give to charity and so on. So you have a vision there, right? And then you go into the room with the roadmap, And that's where you plan out to say, okay, these are the things I'm going to do to get from my current situation to the target. So in the roadmap, you say, okay, I'm going to make sure I complete my studies. I make sure that I get the necessary qualification. I'm going to look for a job in this industry, and so on and so forth, right? And then you realize that as you're doing that, you have a lot of decisions that you have to be making, and you need to have some principles to guide you when you're making those decisions. And that's where you go into the principles room and say, okay, one of your principles could be, I'm only going to work in organizations which do not do any harm to the environment, right? And another principle you may have is, I want to work overseas for a number of years during my career. So you put out some principles, and the principles will help you to decide, when you're doing your roadmap, whether the choices that you make, follow the principles or not, right? So this very simple strategy house, right, where you have 4 rooms: current situation, roadmap, target, and principles. A very useful guide, no matter what sort of strategy you're doing, right? Now, what you will find if you use this four room approach is that a lot of the times, why do strategies fail? A strategy could fail because people are spending so much time, say, in their target, right? There's nothing in the roadmap. There are no principles. There's no current situation. They're all just dreaming. Right? That's why your strategy is not working. Or you talk about your current situation and all the problems that you have. You're not talking about your future, right? And you're not thinking about how you're going to get there. Yeah? And sometimes you have a dream and you understand where you are, but you don't have the action, right? So you need to have all these 4, then you can have a good, robust strategy. Yeah? So if you apply this concept to IT, IT needs three additional rooms, and that's why it's called the house with 7 rooms. Because in IT, what you will find is that in any business, the people in the business, they're thinking about the business, right? With the current situation of the business, and then they'll be thinking about where the business wants to go, and then some of the business capabilities that they need to have. A lot of the business, there are people that don't really understand IT. Yeah? And so they leave it to the IT people to do the bottom part. They say, what are the IT systems that we have today, and what are the IT systems that we need to support the business, and what's the roadmap of IT capabilities, right? And then you have some principles to make decisions. And therefore, you have these additional rooms when it comes to an IT strategy framework. But the concept is the same. Yeah, find out where you are and where you want to go, right? And then the roadmap to get there. There are some business things and there's some IT things, and then you have some common principles on how you make decisions so that you're all aligned. Yeah? Okay, this may sound a bit abstract at the moment. I'll go and into some details. Then this concept become clearer. Right. Maybe at this point, if there are any questions, I take a pause and see. Okay. Any question? Nothing yet? Okay, let's continue, right? Okay, so how does it look like in real life? And I was thinking about this, and I actually went back to my archive and I pulled out an IT strategy that I did for a bank in Australia, right? This strategy was done, let me think now. It was done about 15 years ago. Yeah. Again, very hard to read, but you'll see the rooms here. On the left-hand side, you have the current business situation. Yeah, and then these are the things that the business wants to do, the roadmap, and then this is where the business wants to go, right? And then the bottom part here is the IT. These are the IT projects, and this is where the IT wants to go, right? And then here we talk about some principles of the business. Yeah. So it's very real, right? It's also very logical, and the template can be used for almost any kind of strategy that you want to do. Okay, so let's go back to the potential answers and try to put them into the right rooms. Yeah. So if you analyze the possible answers, right, and then I put the color code, right. So you look for patterns in the answers. Describe how technology will be used to achieve an objective. So there's no working from home, for our customer, selling products online, allowing our customers to pay using different ways. Yeah? And then there are also some guidelines and principles to guide technology decisions. We are going digital, right? We are moving to the cloud. Then a roadmap of projects to deploy technology and organization. These are some of the projects: digital marketing, using AI, want to do more with data, machine learning. And then there's also a description of the IT products and software tools that we use today: the Microsoft Office, SAP, Google. The plan to deploy new technology. Yeah, we're going to upgrade our systems, and the plan to change the way technology is managed. We're going to outsource. We're going to do various things. Okay. So if I put it into the 7 box, you see in the current system. Okay, let me start from the top. On the business side, we see some words here about a plan to change the way IT technology is managed. That's a business capability. But on the IT side, you see we talk about a description of IT products, software, and tools. On the roadmap, in the roadmap room, we talk about a roadmap of projects, a plan to deploy a new technology or to change existing technology. Yeah. And then if you drill down further, I've put all those pieces into the 7 rooms. Yeah. So to give you a more detailed idea, maybe the IT one is easier to understand. See, in your target IT architecture, you're talking about, everyone talks about digital, right? So you things that to do with going to the cloud, yeah, or using software as a service, or using more data, using AI, doing things more things on using the mobile phone, and then going global. Yeah? So these are some of your target IT architecture. Currently, we only use Microsoft Office, we use SAP, we use Google, we use Zoom. And then these are the roadmaps of projects to get you from where you are to your target. Yeah? So you see, these are all the different projects. In the case of the business is that currently we are working from home. Yeah? We use salesmen, we've got a call center, we have limited suppliers, yeah? And our customers are located in limited geography, and there's a high fixed cost. And then the target is that we want everything to be digital, right? We want to minimize our fixed costs, and we want our staff and customer and suppliers to be from anywhere. Yeah? We want to be able to sell them, or they can work from anywhere. So that's your target business architecture. And then how do you get there? You say, okay, I'm going to improve customer service. And then you say, to improve customer service, how do you do it in IT? You're going to introduce AI, yeah, in the call center. We're going to sell products online. Yeah? So there's digital marketing. We're going to make it easier for customers to pay. So you're going to use many different payment systems, right? And then and so on and so forth, right? So there are some principles, some guidelines that you're going to apply to because you're going to make a lot of decisions along the way, right? So you say we're going to have a cloud first principle, meaning if the system is available in the cloud, we'll use it, yeah, rather than buy a server and put it into a data center. Where possible, we only want to pay per use. So if you're not using it, we don't want to pay for it, right? So that will reduce your fixed costs. And the other principle is that we want to see incremental results. Whenever we implement IT, we don't wait for 10 years before you see results, or no, like 3 or 4 years. We want to see results after a few months. And then we want to be able to access our system from anywhere. Yeah? So this becomes your guideline for the decisions you need to make. Yeah? Okay, so that's an example of an IT strategy framework. Is it clearer? Okay, let's move on. Yeah. Okay, there's a slight detour here. If you talk about the current systems, right? How do you describe what are the current systems that are used in an organization? Because there's so many systems, yeah? And it's useful to have a framework in that box to describe the current IT systems. Let me give an example. If you go to any company today, right, you'll find that they have business applications, they have finance, procurement, or human resources applications, and then you'll find they have some applications that are for communication and collaboration, right? And then there will always be an infrastructure where you have the servers, the storage, and the network, and then of course there's security. So when you're talking about describing the current IT systems in an organization, you should be thinking about this different areas and say, okay, what are you using today? What business applications do you have, right? Or what do you use for communication and collaboration? Is it just email? Do you use WhatsApp? Do you use Zoom? And so on and so forth, right? So this helps you to drill down and get a complete picture of the IT systems. And let me share with you, this is something which I did for a bank, another bank in Australia about 12 years ago, right? And this was the framework where, these are all the different systems that they have. So this is kind of like the current system in the bank. And then the challenge is to say, okay, in 5 years' time, how will it look? How will it be different? Okay, so think about the framework when you're trying to describe your current system. Okay, now we've talked so much about an IT strategy, right? So why is it important to have an IT strategy? The first thing to bear in mind is that IT is expensive. Yeah? If you get it wrong, it can cost the company a lot of money, also a lot of embarrassment. I've put a link here where there was a study done of some serious IT project failures in Malaysia. Yeah? So this link, there's some examples. The second thing to realize about IT is that there are so many choices and opinions. Yeah, especially in a large company, if you allow everyone to select what they want, it can get really messy. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned to you just now about even in the family, right? If you have some people using Samsung, some people using Apple, you really see how difficult it is to share things. There are extra step involved. Yeah? And you have a lot of duplication of photos and so on and so forth. Now, the other thing is, you will be implementing different systems at different times. You can't implement all systems in one go. So you need to make sure that the systems can talk to each other, that you can interconnect the systems. Therefore, you need to have a strategy, right? To say, if I buy this kind of system, and this means that in future, I can only buy systems that can talk to it. So IT is interconnected. So you need to have a strategy around that. And most importantly, every business today is dependent on IT more and more, right? So your IT strategy must be able to anticipate what your business wants to do. So that if the business wants to grow, IT can support it, right? If the business wants to do something different, IT can also support it. If they need more data to analyze the business, you're there to also support it. Okay, and then finally, IT is always changing, and on one hand, you cannot be left behind, but on the other hand, you cannot chase every new toy, right? So you always need to make a conscious decision whether, when you hear about a new technology, whether you should move to that technology, or you can say wait for a few more years before we move. So there's always this thing, and therefore, you need to have an IT strategy if you're going to do that properly and not waste money. Yeah? Okay, let me. I mentioned to you, yeah, if you look at, say, the number of different technologies that's available in the world today, and in every company, they have to decide which of these should be introduced to the business, right? They cannot let everybody choose what they like. You need to choose a subset of this to run your business, right? And so you need to have a strategy, to make that choice, yeah. Because if you don't, it's going to be a project, right, which is very expensive and difficult. And if you don't have a strategy, there's this thing, I'm sure you've come across this, right? They call it the application integration spaghetti, where everything is lines are connected all over the place, right? Whereas if you have a strategy, it's easy for you to put in a new system because you know how the system can integrate with every other system. There's easy to make changes. You can keep track of where information is flowing and so on, right? So that's why you need to have a strategy, so you can make changes to the business faster. You can introduce new things to the business faster. Okay, now I want to get into the whole process of developing an IT strategy, right? So the third tip that I want to pass to you, if you are really serious about getting involved in developing IT strategy in your career, right? One of the things you need to do, and you can start doing even today, okay? You need to be curious about business. Okay? In fact, I would say if you're not curious about business, you should not get involved in IT strategy. Okay? Because you will really come up with a lousy IT strategy. You really need to be curious about business, right? And and um, uh, and there's so many opportunities today to really, our life is run by businesses, right? Those of you who are at home, just look at the way that you are buying things today, right? The whole business of placing an order on the internet and then getting it delivered to you to your house, right? And look at the business structure behind it, and see how it has evolved over the last 10 years, 20 years. It's incredible, right? Those of you who watch Netflix, right? And then you compare to say what used to happen before. We had to go to the cinema, we had to buy a ticket, we had to travel there, and today we can watch any movie that we like, at the click of a button, right? And there's a whole business around it. How does it work? Yeah, how is the business set up for that? So there's so many things. It makes you think about how the world runs. So you need to have that basic curiosity about how does the world work, yeah, and how do the business operate, and how do the businesses work with each other? How does the business make money? How does the business save costs? And what are the different ways to reach out to customers? What are the different ways to get supplies? You need to be curious about this business. Then you can actually do a good IT strategy. Remember when I was talking about the house with 7 rooms, right? For this one here, the top layer, the top 3 rooms are all about business. You need to understand that before you can, because you need to understand what's up there. Then you can build upon the IT foundation, which are the 4 boxes below. Okay. Okay. So be curious about business, and you do this by talking to people. You do this by just reading articles. There's so many things you can read about it on the internet. You can do this by watching videos. You go to YouTube. There's so many videos about businesses. Be curious about that. Okay? And not only businesses in Malaysia, but most importantly, I think these days you have a good idea of a business that's in another country. Think about what you will need to actually bring that idea into Malaysia. Okay? Okay, how to develop an IT strategy. So let's imagine, right, that you are a consultant, right, and then you have been invited by a company to help them to develop an IT strategy. So what's your plan? Okay? So this is an example of a plan that you can come up with to say the first phase. Again, think about the 7 rooms, right? The first phase is I need to understand about the room or the current business situation. I need to learn about the company's business. I need to learn about the current IT landscape, their business strategy, the pain points, yeah. And then at the same time, I need to do some research on relevant technologies, what other companies in the same industry are doing. So you will say to your customer here to say, okay, I need to spend a few weeks to talk to your business leaders, to learn about your business, and then I want to talk to your IT uh, leaders. I want to learn about the IT landscape where they are, right? I want to learn about your business strategy, your pain points, yeah. And then at the same time, you will be doing some research. You say, for example, if you are being asked to do an IT strategy for a restaurant, then you should just go and do some research on technologies in restaurants, right? Or if you are working in a bank, you should go and do research while you have that interview with the client. Okay? And then you find out, what are the other companies in that same industry, what they are doing, to get an idea. So that's the first phase, just understanding the landscape, understanding what's the relevant technologies, do your research, right? And then say, after I've done all that, I will then want to have a workshop, right, with some of your staff, yeah, to determine the capabilities that are required, right? Uh, what do you actually need? Do you need, for example, to improve your customer service? You need to find different ways to connect with your suppliers, right? And so on and so forth. And then you determine what are the capabilities that are required, and then you ask them, how much money do you have, right? And what are your priorities? And then you say, okay, tell me, you give me a list of 20 things that you want to do. Tell me which is the top three most important, right? And why are they important? And then this become the urgent ones. And then you say, okay, we should focus on this on year one. And then year two, we focus on the another three. Year three, we focus on another three, right? So in the third phase, you develop that roadmap, right, to say, this is what I think we should do in the first 6 months, and then the next 6 months, and this is roughly how much it's going to cost. And then here are some principles that we need to agree about, how we're going to decide. For example, we say maybe we are not going to have our own data center anymore. We want to do everything in the cloud, right? You want to move away from all your traditional advertising. We're going to do all our advertising will be done digitally using Facebook or Google, whatever, right? So you need to agree on some principles. Okay, so that's okay. The next bit, yeah, as you can see, important to understand where the business is, but more importantly, equally important, you also need to have a broad understanding of technology. Yeah? It doesn't mean that you need to have your own personal experience working on the technology. If you do, that helps. But you need to have the ability to appreciate technology, right? And what technology can do. Yeah? Just to give you an example, right? If I look back, right, from the 1980s, uh, what this chart shows is from the 1980s and then to the 1990s, the 2000 and then 2010, the last, and I mentioned to you just now that I started, I did my first IT strategy in the early 1990s, right? And if you look at that time there, how life was so simple, you don't have so many choices, right? We didn't even have the internet, right? We didn't even have mobile. We didn't have the cloud. Yeah? We didn't have all these things about IoT or wireless or social media. Even online shopping wasn't there. And but then as time progressed and as we evolved, right, more and more options came out. And then today all these are available. So your IT strategy today is much more difficult to do because you have more choices that you have to make. But it's so important if you want to be a good IT strategist, you need to be able to track, right, some of the trends, what's happening out there. Because you need to look ahead. You have to say, hey, there's something that's coming along that could have an impact on this industry, so I need to be prepared for it.
Sorry,
Okay.
Edward, the
Yes.
color code, just now the one, red is
Yeah.
not available,
Yeah. Red means
green,
not available. Red not available yet. Or yeah. Yellow means it's being introduced, and then green is available.
okay, thank you.
Okay. So supposing you have developed an IT strategy, right? And so you present the IT strategy to the management, and then it's approved, right? Then the next question is, what you need to do to implement the strategy, right? Uh, which means what do you do to execute those projects, right? And I'm not going into details here, but this is a separate topic where you set up a steering group, you set up a project management office, and then you kick off the projects. You recruit resources, you agree on the methodology, and then you do regular reviews, and then when the system goes live, you transition to support, and then you make sure you measure the benefits, you capture the lessons learned, and then you identify areas for improvement. So this is the part that takes up a lot of resources within an IT department. Yeah. Um, Now, one of the important things that you need to think about to consider when you're doing IT strategies, when you implement an IT strategy, you are in fact into this organization. Yeah? So you need to understand the whole concept of change. Yeah, and if people have been doing things in a certain way, and then now you're going to ask them to do things differently using a new technology, it's not just the implementation of technology that's difficult, right? It's getting people to change their working behavior, their mindset, and so on and so forth. So this is another thing where if you want to be a good IT strategist, you need to understand change. What? How do you get people to accept change? How do you sell a change? Yeah? how do you make the change relevant to people? Yeah. So something which I'm not sure whether you have change management as one of your topics in your curriculum, but this is an area which conceptually it's easy to understand, but in practice it's very difficult. And last year was a good year for all of us to really experience what it actually means when we have to go through change, right? Where we had to work from home, right? And had to do a lot of things from home. And we are, you look at the pain that we went through to change our work habits, right? To change the way that we do to buy things, the way that a lot of things had to change. And then in some cases, some people just could not cope with it, right? And there was a lot of resistance, a lot of unhappiness. But what you find is that gradually, when people realize that there's no no alternative, they come to accept it, right? And then they try to make it work. So there's a whole journey that people go through when you have to make change. And the journey that we went through last year uh, happens in any large organization. Whenever you want to use technology, or whenever you want to introduce a new technology, because people have to change the way they work to do things in a different way. So be mindful of that, and because the way that you implement the IT strategy will be very much dependent on your understanding of change. Okay, after listening to me, I'm not sure whether you say, "Oh, IT strategy is a very difficult thing." I don't uh, sounds too hard, but really, it's not for anyone who's really interested in business and has an interest in technology. Developing the skills, right, to develop to be a good IT strategist, it's not difficult, right? As I mentioned, business acumen. Yeah, you need to understand about business. And you do that by talking to people, talking to friends, observing, reading, watching. Technology awareness, appreciation, right? You equip yourself with the knowledge of a wide range of technology, and again, by reading, watching, experimenting, or keeping an open mind. Okay? As you can see, when you're developing an IT strategy, you don't go into a room and just write it down and then you present a report at the end of that, right? Unlike doing an exam, there's a lot of discussions that you need to have with various people. Right? So you need to be listening to them, asking them the right questions, challenging them to think about doing things differently. So good communication skills, interpersonal skills, yeah, consulting skills. These are all things that you can also develop, yeah, in various ways. You need to be curious. You need to be creative because, as I mentioned, there are so many possibilities whenever you have a problem, right? And so you need to say, how are other companies solving it? What failed and the last time, and how can we overcome it? What is there a different way of doing this? So you need to be curious. You need to be creative. And then, at the heart of this is you're designing a house, right? So you need to have a concept of an architecture, a design. You need to be able to think. If I'm an architect, how would it look like? Yeah, of the whole thing. So the appreciation of good design, good architecture is important because here you are talking about uh, many different systems which you need to implement in a certain sequence, right? So there's a whole architecture involved, to make sure that things all fit together. So that's also very important. And then lastly, as I mentioned, change management. You need to appreciate what change is and understand the journey that people go through when they have to make a change. Yeah. Okay, now let's talk about IT strategy during a crisis. Sometimes when a company is in a crisis and you're going to talk to them about IT strategy, they say, "What IT strategy? We got a fire here that we have to put out, right?" Um, it's very interesting to reflect. And if you look at what's happened last year, for example, right? And a good question to ask is, which companies are surviving the current pandemic, or the economic crisis, and how did the IT strategy help? So think about those successful companies, right? And I think you will find that those companies that have been able to digitalize their business, they're able to sell their product through the internet, right? And they're able to deliver their products um, well. They are the companies that are still surviving, right? And a good comparison is, there are some companies that are struggling, yeah. And the question is, you say that if they had done certain things, they might be better off today, yeah. Um, Restaurants, for example, there are some restaurants that have been operating like a restaurant, but they've also been able to deliver takeaway through Grab and so on, right? And that happened even before the crisis. So when the pandemic hit them, it was very easy for them to just switch into the digital way, and they were still able to run and make money, right, and survive because their IT strategy, which is to connect their systems with their suppliers and with their delivery partners, were in place, and that strategy could work for both, yeah, uh, cases, yeah. And then, of course, you should ask yourself, what are the new opportunities in the current crisis, and what IT strategy is needed to exploit them? I mean, a very good case study here is yourself, right? And the way that you are receiving your education or your lectures, right? And I think many people are now saying that, hey, we can actually attend classes without leaving our home, and it's pretty effective, right? And then the whole education business, I think, is going to be transformed because of this. Students may say, hey, and I want to pick certain subjects from maybe even different universities, because some universities have got good lecturers on certain things, and then I have a portfolio of topics that I have studied that will entitle me to some qualification, right? Instead of just being stuck to a particular organization. At the same time, you have teachers who say, hey, I can teach anybody in the world, yeah, and I know I'm a very good in this particular topic. I can maybe have a digital business where I can run sessions on this topic to almost anyone in the world who wants to listen to me, yeah, and that gives me another source of income. Yeah? So I think there's going to be a huge transformation in the way that we are working. But I see behind all that, right, is an IT system, or a set of IT systems, a platform. So, and there are choices to be made there, and therefore, the people who would take a step back and decide, what they want to do, and then they decide on the IT strategy, they are the ones who are in the best position to take exploit the current situation. Now, during a crisis, there are certain things that companies need to do. Yeah? Uh, First of all, in the short term, they say we need to identify the essential IT services that need to carry on. So we just continue to use those services. Everything else we want to turn off, right? We want to reduce costs. We need to turn off services that we don't need. If there are projects that are not, let's see whether we can stop the project or suspend the project to save money, right? And then if there are contracts, let's see whether we can postpone, renegotiate, or even cancel the contracts, because this is where money is flowing out of the system. And then at the same time, they may have to start thinking about new services. For example, oh, we need to now make sure that everybody can work from home, right? Providing with notebooks, with the software, and so on. Right? And in businesses where you say we need to be able to take orders through the internet and have our products delivered, right? So they need to be thinking about building the integration into Grab and all those systems. And the way to engage with the customers using social media and so on. If you have not done that before, you now need to think about doing that more. Yeah? And then in the longer term, I think that the big lessons here is that when the pandemic hits, your every company that has a high fixed cost will suffer. So you want to minimize your fixed costs. And this is something which the people who have been pushing cloud have always said, right? Why do you want to have your own data center where there's a big fixed cost? You buy your servers and so on, right? Whether your business is selling one plate of noodles or 1,000 plates of noodles, you still have to pay for your data center and the servers in it, right? But if you go to the cloud where you only pay what you use, if business drops, you don't pay as much, and you only pay what you use. You can even stop the subscription, right? And then you get, if you are smart enough to say everybody has a mobile phone or everybody has a desktop at home, so if I can get them to use their own desktop or their own notebooks to access the company system, that will also save me costs, right? So these are things to minimize your fixed costs. And then the other thing is, software as a service. Um, if you have an ERP system which you are owning and running at home in your own company, you have a very high fixed cost. But if you use it, say, in the cloud, and the business drops, you can reduce your subscription, your transactions will go down, right, and so on. And then, of course, there's also your permanent employees and contractors. If you have a high number of permanent employees, when there's a downturn, you just have to pay them, right? But if you are using contractors, you can just terminate the contract, and then those contractors can be deployed by their employers to other business. So there are things that we happened last year, where for many years when I was doing IT strategy, we don't even think about that, right? And you say oh, we don't even look at the worst case scenario, right? And it's only when the worst case scenario hits us, which was last year, that people are now saying, hey, if only we have paid more attention to this worst case scenario, we would have been able to cope or survive better, right? So that's I think the big lesson. Okay, let me just sort of summarize my talk here. Yeah. First of all, I think I hope that you're convinced, right, that a good IT strategy is essential for business success. Any serious business today is dependent on IT. And if you are serious, you need to make sure that you have the right IT solution services deployed for your business, right? And you do it consciously and systematically. The second thing to realize is that it's not difficult, right? This is a house with 7 rooms. An IT strategy can be developed by anyone with a broad interest in technology and business, and an understanding of how IT adds value to the business. And I think many of you are in your late teens or early 20s, right? You have a whole life ahead of you to develop this interest and this skill, right? And I envy you, because if you look at what's available today compared to when I first started all, right, you have much more to look at and more choices to consider. So it's really very exciting. And then thirdly, when you have to deal with a lot of information, always use a framework, right? And I've shared to you a couple of frameworks here today. And remember, for IT strategy, if anything that you take away from this talk is the house with 7 rooms, right? If you're talking about an IT strategy. If you're talking about strategy in general, the house with 4 rooms, right? And the 4 rooms is, when you need to make sure that you go into the room to talk about the current situation, and you go to the room and talk about the future, you go to the room and talk about the roadmap, and then you go to the room and you talk about the principles, and the whole thing must be interconnected. Okay, then the last point is you need to be prepared for the good times as well as the bad times. IT is expensive. The easier you can change your strategy when the economic situation changes, the better. Right? So minimize the fixed costs, align your variable costs with income. So this is what I wanted to share with you on IT strategy. We have a few minutes now for questions. Does anyone have a question?
Thank you, Edward, for your sharing. Let me start off the questions rolling.
Yeah.
Okay. What qualifications are needed for someone to become an IT strategist? Would a business degree background suffice, or should the person have a technical degree, computer science degree?
I think it can be either. You can have a business degree, but and then you need to demonstrate that you have if you have a business degree, you have to also spend some time understanding technology, right? And that you can do on the job. Yeah. So if you have a computer science degree, in fact, most companies expect you to have a computer science degree if you want to do IT, right, or IT strategy. If you show that you have an interest in business, that you have done things with business people, that will also give people the confidence that you understand enough about business to come up with an IT strategy. So I don't think there's a specific qualification, right? I mean, I would even imagine that if you have a degree in, say, arts or psychology, but you have an interest in business and you have a curiosity about technology and you are able to demonstrate those capabilities, um, you can also be an IT strategist. So at the end of the day, it is more about your interest in IT and technology, and it's about your interest in applying technology to solve business problems. In order to do that, you need to understand uh, business. You need to appreciate what IT can, what technology can do, and then and if you have a broad enough uh, experience, exposure, and you can talk sense, right? People will say, hey, you seem to have a good idea of these things. Come and help us to develop an IT strategy.
Okay. The next question is how do IT governance play with IT strategy? How does it link together?
Okay, IT governance, right? Where I mentioned here, how to implement an IT strategy. So usually, in any large organization, um, the IT governance will first of all say we need an IT strategy to be done, right? And then there's a project that kicks off, and then once the IT strategy, the picture with the 7 rooms is done, they have to then to present to the governance team to say this is our proposal, right? And then they have to get make sure that it's approved by the management team, and then once it's approved, then the IT governance will come in and say, okay, let's implement this approved IT strategy, and then this whole thing here, the implementation of an IT strategy. That's where IT governance comes in to make sure that all this is taken care of. Okay? So IT
Okay.
governance ensures that the IT strategy is done and oversees the implementation. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Anyone got any questions? Maybe a turn. Are there jobs for IT strategists? Are there
Uh, I
demand?
mean, I mean, usually if you go to LinkedIn, right, you sometimes you do find people are looking for IT strategies. Yeah. But and generally you don't. That's not like your first job. Right? You go in, you have to be a developer or business analyst or something. Then you later on you train up, right? And then you once you get a few years of experience, then you can start maybe a junior IT strategist, or you get involved in IT strategy projects, and then that's how you build up your credential.
Okay.
Can I
Good.
make a request for all in the call? If you can just go into chat, right, into the chat box, and enter one word to summarize what you have, how you feel now after listening to my presentation, to give me some feedback. Informative, okay, thank you. Enlightened, good, thank you. Clarifies IT strategy, impressive, thank you. Structured, okay, thank you. Instructional, okay, interesting. Okay, Meng Chin Hui.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone else? Last. Going. Very quiet group. Okay. Before we go, can we take a picture of everyone? Can you switch on your webcam? And yeah. And Edward, you stop presenting. You end your
Okay, let me
presentation.
let me just stop it. Okay.
Okay. Come.
Right.
Show your faces. So far, I only see one. Okay, all very young BAM students, huh?
Oh my God.
Why?
I envy all of you, man. You're starting a journey, which is so exciting. Which is so exciting. There's so much that you can, use IT for in the world today, yeah? And it's up to your imagination, your courage. It's the world for you to conquer. Right? And it's so great to be at that age where you are at the start of your career, and so I envy all of you, and I hope that you do go on to enjoy the work that you do to apply technology to make the world a better place for all of us. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And once again, I want to thank everyone of you for coming and Edward Chin for enlightening us about this IT strategy. I always wonder how do we strategize when IT is such a complex and ever-changing field. Yeah. So thank you for making a complex subject simple, Edward.
Okay, welcome, guys. If you have any questions, you want more, please feel free to contact me directly or through Jinhui. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We are
Thank
and
you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
thanks, Edward. Bye.
Okay, welcome. Thank you.
Let you know about the next week's thing.
Okay.